Now back to Inside Real Estate. Here's Mike the Realtor.
Hey folks, we are back inside Real Estate Sports and Entertainment. Mike Kruziniga here, your host. Hey folks, it's time for the entertainment segment. I am excited about who I'm going to be talking to right here, right now. On the line calling in with us, we've got Dr. Sean McFate. We're talking about a former paratrooper, 82nd Airborne Division, went into the private military side. Wow, this guy's got one heck of a resume. Senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, a professor of grand strategy and warfare at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service and NDU, Pentagon's top war college. Author of the new book, Shadow War, a Tom Locke novel. Dr. McFate, are you on the line with us?
Yes, Mike, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. We got you loud and clear, 5x5. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing really well. Thank you.
Well, thanks for calling in on a Sunday morning, especially on a Mother's Day morning. And, of course, happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. Hey, let's talk a little bit about you and your background. First of all, I read the book. I finished it last night, and a great book. I really, really enjoyed it, and I want to talk about how it kind of shifted my perspective on a number of things. But, before we kind of get into all that, let's give the folks a little bit about your background, which is extremely broad. And, you're somebody, everybody I think out there would want to have to dinner because you've got so much in your background. Let's get to it.
Well, thanks. That's very kind, Mike. It really is. Well, I served in the 82nd Airborne Division under very young, at that time, Lieutenant Colonel Stanley McChrystal and Colonel David Petraeus, who became generals that we know and love. And then I got out in 2000 thinking that the world was nothing but peacekeeping, and I didn't want to be doing peacekeeping any longer. And I sort of fell backwards into the private military world, which is, you think about Blackwater, it's much bigger than Blackwater. And I was working in Africa for many years, doing some interesting things on U.S. contracts, and did that for a while and then got out of that, did some graduate work, went to Harvard, got a PhD from London School of Economics, and now I'm a professor of war and strategy at the Pentagon's War College and also at Georgetown. And I sort of wrote this book to sort of, I think in some ways fiction is a lot better truth teller than nonfiction about some of the weirder and murkier things out there.
Right.
And that's sort of how I got to the book.
Right. Yeah, I felt like when, my perspective and, for maybe folks that are outside of the Beltway, in middle America, we don't necessarily have all of this inside news in our face all the time. And, I think middle America perspective on private military contractors is maybe a little bit jaded because of maybe just what comes out in the news cycles that's kind of bad press. And it's not all true. There's a lot of good to it. And the bottom line is PMCs work with our militaries and our governments as well as governments abroad and corporate interests hand in hand and are absolutely necessary.
That's right. I mean, there's a lot of good and a lot of bad about private military companies. And when you think of Blackwater, we think of one of the low points of the Iraq War, and justifiably so. But sometimes some of these companies can do good things. Like when I was in Africa, we helped prevent a genocide in Burundi and Rwanda. We helped rebuild an army in Liberia that obeyed the rule of law after Charles Taylor, who was a villainous warlord president. But there's a lot of concerns about this. What happens when you have an industry that's incentivized to expand conflict for profit? What happens when some of these companies, I'm thinking about ones outside the United States, decide to go into business for themselves? And that's kind of what the novel explores. It explores, in some ways, the future of war. And I think there's a lot of things to be concerned about, but they're not what you think they are.
Right. Yeah, I thought so. I thought so as well. And it is scary. And because, what happens when, these corporations get so large, and what happens when their interests or their clients' interests, who maybe are corporations or banking institutions, what happens when they go against national interests? And by and large, all those interests align in many cases, and everybody's working together. But what happens when their clients' interests go against our national interest, for example, here in the U.S.? When that happens, what does happen?
Well, that's the concern, Mike, right? So, look, Eric Prince, the guy who founded Blackwater, he's a former Navy SEAL, a big flag waver. He left the country, and now he's working in Africa for China, right, doing sort of private military services down there. And also, what happens when multinational corporations want to have a military for their own purposes? And that's kind of what the book sort of discusses, for example. You have corporate interests, which, they may be an American corporation, but they have global interests. Mm-hmm. And now they can rent firepower, and they can rent secrecy. They can rent the equivalent of special operations forces. And that's what's going on. It's going on behind the headlines. And sometimes those converge with U.S. national interests. Sometimes they do not.
Right. Yeah, and I thought also what was interesting in the book, and I felt like as I was reading it, I was kind of getting a glimpse into, your history a little bit. And at first I was skeptical of the concept of, the character Tom Locke, which is the main character in the story, and that, again, this was a perspective shift a little bit for me in that, private military contractors, guns for hire, that type of thing. But, at the end of the day, look, all of these professionals, and they are very skilled, trained professionals, trained by our own military. Look, they were all former military. Then they go into this private side, which is a very needed service. And I thought you kind of gave a voice and a great, you really built this character. And I know it's part of you. And it just gave life to, look, these are men and women that worked in our military and now went private, and it's a necessary part of, the world stage at this point, but kind of gave it a soft side and a real side instead of almost in a public relations manner to me, gave it life, and that it's not all of those things that the bad side of press that is out there.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I mean, look, this novel began as a memoir, and then we decided to fictionalize it for a lot of different reasons. Mostly because it was safer. And, not everybody in this industry is evil. And the industry can do a lot of good things. I think the idea of having basically a mercenary industry in the world is a very dangerous thing. But not everybody, it doesn't always have to be used for bad. I mean, it's possible that, the industry could help buttress peacekeeping operations. It's sort of like fire. It depends how you channel it. I think here's the bigger kicker, though. I mean, is that the idea of war between states like World War II, that era is over. We're getting to an era now, like we're seeing in this novel happens to be set in eastern Ukraine. We have several different interests, not just states, but others. Like Putin is hiring mercenaries. Eastern Ukraine and Western Ukraine are hiring mercenaries. You have corporations in there. You have journalists doing stuff there. It's really weird. Mm-hmm. So the idea of the novel is to actually not make a case for the mercenaries, even though Tom Locke obviously is sympathetic, although a deeply flawed person. But the idea is to give the reader a battlefield tour of modern wars, and going behind the headlines. And I hope we did that.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I mean, I thought, and first of all, the title Shadow War, I thought it was very apt because, these shadow wars are going on, as we speak all over the globe. And you're right, the modern warfare, it's totally different. The era of, nation A against nation B, that's not really going on. Everything's behind the scenes, and nobody really knows about it. So Shadow War, the title, I thought was perfect. And I thought it really delved into that whole world and helped, give people a better understanding of of what is going on, out there behind the scenes, and that's the way it's going to be for the future. And it'll be interesting to see how how everything shakes loose with all of that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's supposed to be, I want this to be an introduction to readers, beyond the musty tomes of academic writing and DC wonk policy writing about, what is really going on out there, and this new type of warfare and who the fighters are. Nobody's wearing uniforms, you know what I'm saying? But there is war, and I think that there's headlines we get here, but there's behind that, and also this book doesn't just take place in Bethel, it also takes place inside of Washington, and shows you the interesting way that Washington D.C. works, some of which might make your listeners vomit, but I wanted to be as accurate as possible. I think that there's a big black box. We see what goes in, we see what comes out, and this book tries to get into the actual box itself.
Yeah, and I think it does an excellent job of that. It was one heck of a read. I really enjoyed it. By the way, folks out there, we're talking to Dr. Sean McFate, author of Shadow War, a Tom Locke novel. Now, this is going to be available starting in 2 days. Isn't that right?
That's right. It comes out on Tuesday. It's launching a book series. We're following Locke. We're finishing up the sequel actually right now. And it's sort of, the idea is you sort of see the front lines of modern warfare through his eyes, but it also looks at the international intrigue and politics behind it. So it's not just like Jason Bourne punching himself out of every situation. There's that, but there's also like the different layers, CEOs working with presidents and lobbyists and, all sorts of other things going on too. It's not just, it's a three-dimensional international spy thriller and action thriller.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of those, they just kind of focus on that character and not necessarily all the details. I thought what this did was it kind of combined all of that. It provides that great character that you can, get behind and you're excited about, but it gets into the details and brings it into reality. For example, in the book, when you the oil, I mean, look, everything kind of all boils down to oil. And that was a huge part of the book.
That's right. So it looks at how the relationship is between oil and war, oil and security. And look, the book is meant to be as realistic as possible. It's gritty, it's granular, it's detailed. Those who have been there will say, yeah, that's right. This is not, this is not just pure fantasy and imagination. Again, this story is a memoir. So it's a look about like how, an oil wildcatter in Houston was working Congress and K Street with London to do stuff in Ukraine to buy, shale oil rights or whatever. And they can use now that you can get, private military companies allow corporations to have militaries, and they can do things with those militaries. And these are not like big tank battalions. Think of them more like special forces,
right?
Covert operations, stuff that's not going to be on Fox or CNN, stuff like that. And that is what's going on every day.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and all of these are special operators and not just our own here in the U.S., but, other nations have their own private militaries that they have as well that are all special forces from their own nations as well. And that really just goes to the fact that this is going to be modern warfare moving forward. It's going to be small conflicts, managed conflicts. And I think what you do well in the book is you talk about these conflicts being managed, in some cases maybe orchestrated, or if a crisis occurs, managing the crisis, but managing it through these private military contractors. That's really going to be how these conflicts are managed moving forward. And if the nation's militaries are needed more and more, it's just going to be outsourced to the PMCs.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think the U.S. is ever going to do that, right? The U.S. has the greatest military in the world, even though the U.S. kind of also kick-started this whole industry in Iraq and Afghanistan, where half of the U.S. force structure there was contracted. Actually, people don't know that a lot. Right. But I mean, I think it's small, rich nations that are going to do this more, who don't have a strong military, or really like oligarchs, super rich people, corporations. They're going to become new types of international superpowers. in a couple decades, unless something is stopped to stop this industry, which I don't think is going to really happen. So I think and the other thing about this industry, it's very international. It's not just like when I was in the industry, when I worked for a company, even though it was headquartered in the United States, it was like any other multinational corporation. Next to me were people from Mexico, from Africa, from New Zealand, you name it. And there is a global market pool of special forces guys who are looking to make some more money than they're making in their current country. And we're seeing this already. We're seeing like Colombian special forces ex-soldiers turning up as mercenaries in Yemen, right? They were hired by Abu Dhabi to fight in Yemen. And we're seeing, big oil companies hire these types of, private military guys in places like Nigeria or other places in the world. So we're seeing this more and more. It's a globalized industry. It's like shirt making. Nobody makes just an American shirt. They're made from all over the world. Right. It's the same here. So it's like the T-shirt, but it's military firepower.
Exactly. That's a good analogy. well, and I think it's going to be a double-edged sword. I mean, it's scary. We don't know what exactly is going to happen. You don't know who's to blame for certain things moving forward in the future, but at the same time, it's a necessary part of the landscape, managing conflicts in the future. PMCs can do things that our U.S. military cannot do. That's why they're there. And sometimes we need them to do those things. We need the plausible deniability. And at the same time, it's kind of if you're out there as an operator, it can be a thankless job. And I thought you kind of brought that perspective into the book as well. I mean, a lot of times PMCs are out there doing things that if things go wrong, nobody's coming in to help them.
That's right. So, look, I mean, in some ways, the book is about a new type of warfare. It's about how Washington, D.C. works. It's about some of these higher level things. In a way, it's about like this group of guys. They're these special forces, mercenary guys who are teams from all over the world. They're not just from America. They have a guy from Thailand, a guy from England. And they're kind of like in the thankless task. Like they're given mission impossible. And if they fail, they're screwed. They're what they call a kite mission, meaning you just cut the kite and it goes off into the storm if something goes wrong. And they're disavowed. And that's kind of the world they live in. And they're doing like really hard, weird things with ambiguity, with unclear orders. It's not just about the paycheck at that level. You're doing it because of something else. And the book kind of gets into like, why do people do this? It's not about the money. It's not about king or country at that point. It's about a few other different things, including, for example, it's about the profession of arms. These guys are guys who really are wanted as being men of arms. And the mission is less important to them than being a professional, whatever that means.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was a very important statement, and I certainly took it home to heart that, these men are professionals, and it is about principle and the profession and not about the money, because putting your life in that kind of danger nonstop is not about the money by any stretch. Folks, hey, we've been talking with Dr. Sean McFate. We've been talking about a Tom Locke novel. It's called Shadow War. Folks, this is available in 2 days, May 10th. Wherever books are sold. Folks, I highly recommend it. I got my advanced copy. It was one heck of a read. I couldn't put it down. I got it done pretty much in 2 days. One heck of a read. Dr. McFate, thank you so much for being on the show. Really enjoyed talking with you about the book, and hope you'll come on after the next one.
That would be great. And thank you very much for having me, and I hope everybody has a great Sunday.
Thank you. Folks, and if you don't mind, hang on the line for a second. Folks, Inside Real Estate Sports and Entertainment, we're back next Sunday, 8 to 9 a.m. As always, have a great Mother's Day. See you later.
The preceding program was furnished by K1 International, LLC, and is responsible for its content.
KLIF.
Here's a news and information update from KLIF.